today's evening program with welcome address by Justice K.S. Puttaswamy.
I, on my own behalf, and on behalf of the Gokhale Institute of Public Affairs and the Indian Liberal Group Bangalore chapter, of which I happen to be the president, extend a hearty welcome to Honorable Mr. Justice K. Sridhar Rao, occupying the dais, and all those present in this hall. Sri K. Sridhar Rao hails from Bellary. After obtaining his law degree from Karnataka University, he enrolled as an advocate, did his apprenticeship in the chambers of Sri D. Gopinath Rao and A.S. Male Bennur of the Bellary Bar. After 12 years' practice, he was appointed District and Sessions Judge in 1988 and in that capacity served in Bangalore, Karwar and Dharwad. With his integrity, sharp intellect and scholarship, he created a record in the disposal of cases of all types, including 1,500 sessions and special cases. With this background, he was elevated as a judge of the Karnataka High Court on 21/2000, in which capacity he has created a record in all branches of law. On the elevation of Honorable Justice Vikramjit Sen to the Supreme Court, Mr. Sridhar Rao has been functioning as the acting Chief Justice from 24/12/2012. I will be happy if Justice Sridhar Rao is made permanent Chief Justice of Karnataka High Court, then elevated to the Supreme Court in his turn. He has authored a handbook titled The Guidelines for Settlement of Motor Vehicle Claims in Local Adalats, which is widely used by Lok Adalats in our state and neighboring states. He has written several articles on legal subjects, one of which was on criminal justice system required reforms, published in the Journal of the Indian Law Institute, New Delhi. This article received recognition from the Kolkata University by awarding him Suprabha Dev Gold Medal in the convocation held in 2003. He has received several accolades and honor from institutions in India. The All India Conference of Intellectuals accorded him the honor of Great Son of Karnataka in 2009. He has also received the award called the Great Son of Soil at Mauritius in 2000. All of us in this hall have some hazy notions on the topical, intricate and difficult subject, namely ills of Indian democracy and ills of Indian economy. I am sure Mr. Justice Sridhar Rao, with his sharp intellect, scholarship and research, will enlighten all of us better and make a significant contribution on the subject. With this brief introduction, I now request Honorable Mr. Justice Sridhar Rao to deliver his lecture on the subject, Ills of Indian Democracy and Ills of Indian Economy. On the completion of his lecture, there will be a question and answer session for 10 minutes. I request such of those members who want to seek further enlightenment from the learned speaker to write down their questions as briefly as possible, go over to the dais and put those questions to which the speaker will respond. Thank you, friends. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Sir Justice K.S. Puttaswamy. The august audience, the audience here are more matured, more responsible, and most of them, I feel, have seen a good, at least some elements of good society in 50s and 60s. Because the present generation is denied of that benefit. the respect for human values, ethics, that's all weaning away. There is a gradual decline. Because as I could see, 1960 society was much better. The decline started from 80s and 90s. Now the things are very worst. It's almost, except pursuit for money, the greed for money, nothing more remains in the society. No human values. You take any field, the education, we had seen good teachers, the tuitions, collection of tuition, collecting fee and then giving tuitions was unknown. Even as a student I have seen, when you are weak in some subject, the teacher calls you to the home and then gives some extra hours devotion to train you. Well, that's all the part of the life. We have no control over the things that happen. We are only part of it. It is something like actors in a drama. You have to play the role. You can't question the author. Today's subject, I have been very seriously thinking on, as a ringside view, what ails our system, what ails our democracy. In fact, first time I delivered an Shabayat Memorial Lecture at Karwar on this subject. It was rather a bold speech. Judges would not dare to tread on, but nonetheless, as academically, we can definitely have a look at the situation and find out, unless you have a correct diagnosis, you can't have a cure. Lot is from 90s onwards, a lot was said about this political corruption and criminalization. The political corruption has now reached its zenith. There is absolutely no control now. Criminalization also, during P.V. Narasimha Rao's time, the debate was going on about the criminalization, how to control it and all. It only ended in debate and there was no solutions. My analysis, the deep-seated dynastic practices, although the Constitution declares that we are republic, but it is something like only, the nomenclature is only like a sugar-coated pill. We are dynastic in our traditions. It is not that the people like it, because it has been manipulated and managed to see that dynastic traditions are entrenched. If you look at the Indian scenario, perhaps I may not have accurate statistics, an approximate basis. From village level onwards, if you take, maybe around you have about 700 odd districts, and they segmented again into taluks and all. I feel not more than 50 to 6 or 1 lakh families control the country, from village level to Delhi. This power shifted from one group to other. No new person has no chance of getting into power. I think we had only one wave of new leadership in 70s, when Congress broke. 69 Congress divided, and then you had a new generation of leaders. Thereafter, the same leadership continues. There is no, see, every 10 years you don't have a change in the leadership. And this is all because the unlimited chances to contest and get elected to the parliament or assembly, any elective body. See, this problem was seriously thought over by the Americans. Therefore, they amended the constitution and made 2 terms only for the president. But looking to the Indian context, I feel you should give only one chance. The population and all. to any elected body, be it Panchayat, Jilla Parishad, Assembly, Parliament, anything, only one chance in your life. If your next kin or your relative, son or somebody is to come, one break, thereafter you can contest. Because the taste of power, once power corrupts absolutely. A man who tasted power is like a man-eater. He doesn't like to give up the power. First they woo electorate with money and later on with the muscle power. The most of the elections now are held. Money and muscle power, they rule the roost. It is all because one person alone gets elected. It is antithesis of democracy to say that he is 7-time elected, 8-time elected, Solila Sardara. These are all not good for a democracy. We never thought over. We have reached a very bold situation. If you once limit these things, then criminalization comes to an end, so also political corruption. When you are deeply entrenched into the system of governance, you become a banyan tree. And you become greedy. You don't think of ethics or anything. Your survival in politics is the only motive. Unless we really uphold the spirit of the Constitution that it is republic, we can't. In all the fields we find, of course, in professions, private professions, you're a doctor wants his son to be a doctor, lawyer wants his son to be a lawyer. Nothing, the businessman wants to be a businessman, like that, because they get some added advantage, goodwill and then experience and other things. But that should not be extended to public service. Public service should remain always truly in spirit a republican. Any person with capacity should have equal opportunity. That is denied in India. Your elections are so hopeless that you can never think of. See, about in 60s or 70s elections, people used to say about 25,000 rupees or that. The election ceiling was there, 25,000 was there. It's unfortunate that the law is so interpreted that you can't spend yourself, but somebody else, your party can spend for it. After all, the value, the basis or the value behind in prescribing a limit for election expense is to see that money power is minimized. But that value is now taken away. It is virtually destroyed. By other means, a party can spend, somebody else can spend. Then money power always plays the game. This is how this, it's all because of dynastic practice. And another thing, the reserved seats. There again, the constituency is locked up. The reason was, of course, I'll narrate it is irrational. The reason was, wherever in a constituency you have highest number of that reserved population, that constituency should be reserved. I don't see any good logic in that. When constituency is reserved, only a person from that reserved category can alone contest. The numerical strength of that population becomes totally irrational and irrelevant, because everyone will vote. The other contesting man is also of same category. This has also led to a dynastic practice. This is most unfortunate. But look at the constitutional amendment, when the local bodies and all these things have come. There this rotation system is given, but not for assemblies and parliament. There was no good reason why you denied that. If it was a rotation, every constituency, irrespective of its numerical strength of that reserved category, they have a voice to say. They can send their representative. Every constituency can send their representative. And thereby, there is no question of locking up the constituency and no chance for manipulations, unholy manipulations. This is another striking, unpleasant aspect of our democratic system. Another thing, by-elections. This has become a nuisance because all through the 5 years, you have one or other elections. It was in lighter vein told that after the independence, the first generation senior leaders became parliamentarians and then assembly. Then the lower rank, where is the political post for them? Then create the local bodies and all. This is how political employment. It is virtually a political employment now. The politics is not merely, it has become a trade, dynastic, and it has assumed the character of a trade. Commercialized. No element of service at all. These by-elections, when a candidate contests on a party tickets and gets elected, for any reason, that particular seat becomes vacant. Why should there be an election? Because people have given already a mandate to that particular party. The party can nominate and send him. Your very philosophy of election on party basis is on the edifice that yes, on party basis he gets elected. Therefore, your law, defection law is there. It's more than 1/3, less than 1/3, then you lose the seat. This is where again an anomaly. This has given rise to endless election events going on in the country. Something like Jatra, an annual fair, like Dodda Ganesha annual fair, it happens. It's very unfortunate. And then the prevention of political corruption. No serious steps have ever been taken to curb the political corruption. Because status quo is quite complacent to the men in governance. We have Prevention of Corruption Act. That was only designed to tackle the bureaucratic corruption. There again, I think my Lord Justice Putswamy is also conversant because he became a lawyer even before I was born. So I have to be very modest before him because he has seen the world in a greater way and has been a very distinguished judge. Normally you find these village accountants, these hospital my staff, only these people are caught. Otherwise, big fish never caught even in bureaucracy. It is very unfortunate that recent amendment, of course, that has not come into effect. See, when you are in authority, a public servant in service, a sanction was necessary. After retirements, no sanction was necessary. But for what good reason Parliament enacted that even after retirement also sanction was necessary, they wanted to introduce. That's a filter where they can really delay the process. So there is no, and you find from up to 1970s, I feel, the parliamentary system was properly running. The MLAs had no role at all. The minister and the bureaucracy, they used to have an interaction and they used to have control the governance. The MLAs could not, they can only go and request the minister, place a demand for anything. But now, the system is so derailed that all legislators have usurped the executive powers in the name of decentralization. And whatever funds given, they dictate to the bureaucracy and everything is siphoned off. Only bureaucrat who does becomes accountable under the Prevention of Corruption Act. No legislation to tackle the political executive who presides and gives directions. This is a very serious area, power without accountability. We have created a situation, a power without accountability. See, in a democracy, for all the social, political, any evil for that matter, problem, social problem or any problem has to be tackled only by way of legislation. We have very poor infrastructure of legislations. It is not even correct to say that legislation is inadequate. There is absolutely totally absence of legislations to tackle the political corruption. And a lot of talk was going about this Lokpal. I think a bill, an act by the parliament is not sufficient. Lot was said about the police reformations, crime investigations and all. As how we have an election commission, a Union Public Service Commission, Comptroller and Auditor General, you should have National Crime Investigation Agency, a constitutional agency with all independent powers. It should be a constitutional body to gain equal status with the other constitutional bodies. Otherwise, a statutory body is always weak. A constitutional body is always strong. Unless you create a constitutional body to tackle, and they should have all independent powers, the problem of political corruption can never be solved. The Lokpal, I don't think the desired results or the expectations, high hopes and expectations one may try to have would get totally belied, because a statutory body cannot effectively tackle a constitutional functionary. Therefore, it is something like Vajra Vajrena Bhadate. A constitutional body, you should have only a constitutional body to tackle them. No proper thinking, no proper debate. Because anything only for convenience, any legislation only for convenience made without debate. Because just to answer, an eyewash or something to convince the people. Most of the legislations have come because of international pressure. Your Narcotics Act and something, all the enactments that have come, it's only to fall in line with conventions. Here again I find this Narcotics Act, it is only ganja and other carriers, small carriers are caught and tackled. The big fish is never, kingpin never is tackled. Kingpin always remains safe. So the enormity of corruption and unlawful activities that are going on, virtually they are unchecked. And there are no legislations, effective legislation to tackle them and bring those offenders to justice. This is a very pathetic situation. Added to this, of course, the linguistic states was the brainchild of Mahatma Gandhi. Even before, in the Congress itself, when he formed the Congress, he had the regional congresses, committees based on the language, because it was necessary then for effective communication and then to effective propagation of the nationalism and to fight for the freedom. That was necessary. And Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru also never agreed for this states based on language. It was one Potti Sri Ramulu who once fasted to death for 70 days. It was said, I don't know how correctly because I have no, but it was said that he wanted to withdraw, but he was forced to go on strike by his supporters and made to die. I don't know. He was made to die. He was made to die. Because the tempo was so much built up that even Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was in a confusion. He was put under pressure. See, those were the leaders who responded to the public opinion. They had respect for the public opinion. Ultimately, the regional language-based states have come. But I am afraid the things that are happening, we are leading for a disintegration. This is a great threat for our democracy and threat for our unity. The language, caste, communalism, water. Water is a new addition now. You play politics with all these things. These are the things to be decided in the national interest, but not so. And several organizations have sprung up, and they claim some legitimacy, and they do all roll call business, everything. No legislation to tackle them. These lumpen elements, they declare themselves as some organizations. I left to your guess only, because everyone knows. Especially trading community are the most harassed, because you have to pay monthly mamuls, and for every function, this Ganesh festival and then Annamata festivals, these are all this November 1, everyone is demanded for expenses. This is how things are happening. There is absolutely no protection to the lawful citizen, law-abiding citizen. It was said that crime never pays, but we are in a situation where people, the younger generation, believe that crime only pays. This is a very grim situation. For extraordinary problems, we have to find extraordinary solutions. As I said, unless you limit the right to contest, you can, any number of times you get defeated, nobody bothers. If you once get elected, next time you should not contest. You have no right to contest. If you bring that, I don't think the present governance is in a mood to bring about such legislations. It's very difficult. Unless such drastic steps are taken, we can't solve, we can't tackle the political corruption and criminalization. Even our legislations, say a man with serious allegation, see, why don't we have a Prevention of Corruption Act or any enactment, any case, why don't you try to see that the case is disposed of at the earliest? Or interim orders be taken, whether this man, prima facie, if he is found to be innocent, because in most of the legislations, now we have introduced a concept, because in most of the cases where it is for the prosecution to prove, in some of the offences like NDPS and then excise offences, there they say forest offences, there they say in order to have a great bail, you should show at least prima facie case of innocence. In a similar way, why not a tribunal or anybody say, or the material, that prima facie, then only you should be given right to contest. Otherwise, everyone, criminal serving a sentence also say, I will get elected, I will contest. It looks so paradoxical, very pathetic. Such people, say, I think in Bombay, some Gauli, some persons they were contesting. They are all known underworld elements. Where can an underworld element, if you contest, where is the chance for a man? Some parties come up on the basis of language, protecting the language and all that. Some on the personality cult. These are the things, very bad trends in the democracy. Not a right culture for the society to develop. So, therefore, I began my lecture there saying that most of you might have seen some traces of good society in your childhood or in your adolescence. But present day generation, if they look at the things that happen around, they say that good things or ethics are only for a platform speech and not for practice. Somebody said, there is one story, a woodcutter with an iron axe, he will go to the forest, it will accidentally fall into the well. He was so good man that goddess will appear, angel will appear, and she will bring about a golden axe. He says, no, I don't want it. Then he says this, ultimately, then she gives everything. The next time again, he brings his wife, old wife, and he will throw her in the well. He says, Jaspal Bhatti's joke it is. Most of you should have it. The angel comes, he starts weeping, no, my wife is. He brings a very beautiful woman. He accepts. Then this man says, why No, if you will bring back, if I say the truth, you will bring back the old lady again. Therefore, I don't want. This is the second thing is the present generation. The man who takes only the iron axe is the old generation. They have absolutely no values at all. The children also, you look at the scenario, see, we have really killed the institution of marriage, institution of family. We have now entered into a surrogate mother. Even motherhood also, mother cannot keep the child in a room for 9 months. They rent the womb and they will have a child. This is the situation now we are coming. And single parent, parent families. What should happen to the psyche of the boy who grows up in that situation? It is because of this licensed situation in America, the generation is terribly spoiled. There the elementary school education is very hopeless. See, the gun culture that is so rampant in America, you find. Even 5th grade, 6th grade students also carry guns and then shoot people. I read one article, it was very correctly written. Because normally American presidents, first term they don't risk with their new innovative ideas. The second term they have no choice because that is the only last chance. Therefore they can push all their agendas without a fear of losing another election. So it was so sad that people expected that Obama may bring about some legislation, some control over this free possession of guns and other things, gun culture, to put it into gun culture. But he never made that attempt to put an end to this because of the gun lobby. So things happen like that because unless we, and as I said, family is lot. Only motherhood remains now. Because as a judge I have seen, in all matrimonial cases, a woman always jealous of having possession of the child. Family is lost. School is also lost. We had this motherhood, family, marriage, school and marriage. It's only motherhood remains. All other institutions are virtually crumbling. It's very difficult. And with this type, what kind of society we are going to build up? Because we do not have any specific policy or an idea as what should be followed. It is something speculative. Anything that happens, that discussed and then they keep quiet. But ultimately, whether a thing that is to be criticized is ultimately, in the end, is good to the society or not is not considered. Even your media debates, everything only for convenience, just as a pastime, they do the things not with seriousness. This is how what I feel, that these are the serious cracking features. Crackling and cracking features on a democracy, unless we seriously address, bring about bold amendments to the Constitution. I don't think we will be able to save our democracy. Because we will be creating a situation like that of Afghanistan or some banana republics. That's a very grim situation we are leading at. Then coming to the ills of Indian economy. Maybe my opinion may be to the dislike of many, but it's a hard fact. The national lending policy, the banking policy, is so stupid. It only favors a person who, it only favors a depositor, whom I call a first money lender. The entrepreneur who borrows the money from bank, for a depositor who doesn't want to take risk, he doesn't want to lose the money, he wants a safe returns of 12 to 14% without element of risk, he will deposit in the bank. We had a situation where the bank interest was up to even 14%. Even now it is 10 to 11% is given. He is safe always. He gets the interest and then he is safe. But entrepreneur, especially the small sectors, the medium scale industries, small scale industries, they borrow. For them, the rate of interest ranges between 18 to 21%. Any business for that matter, a very flourishing business, 12 to 15% is a good profit. Beyond that, one cannot expect. If your returns itself is not more than 15%, if you are asked to pay interest at 21%, how can you expect an entrepreneur to survive? That is the reason our small scale industries have all collapsed. They have become debtors. And more so if they take loan from KSFC. Therefore, like in America, a deposit rate should not be so high. Lending rate should not be more than 8 to 9%. Deposit rate should be less than 4 to 5%. Why do you favor a first money lender, a depositor who want to play safe? But whereas an entrepreneur who wants to contribute to the economy, why is disfavored by your bank and reserve? I don't understand. I really don't understand why that has not come into the minds of our economists. They may say, no, there will not be deposits and all. Well, doesn't matter. Even the Indian public had no faith in investing in shares, in equities. It is only of late that things have come, and there again you find a fraud. The people lose. So, any money, if it is used in the investment, if he is forced to use it, he should be on the rate of interest, apart from this banking, I think in the market, open market, it is around 3 rupees or 4 rupees, something like that. That too against gold or some security. How can a man survive if this is our lending policy? And they say SLR, the statutory liquidity ratio about 40%, now they have made it up 25% or something. Earlier it was about 40%. Only 60, if you deposit of 100, you can only lend 60, 40 you must keep it safe. And only in the public investments, in the government investments, where you get a low returns. Government takes a low return and taxes a small entrepreneur, and virtually he crumbles, he gets ruined. So our lending policy, banking policy is not conducive for a small entrepreneur. It's only big people, they borrow. Like now you find that Kingfisher, he has got other units where it's all flourishing because of the legal these things. He says that's an independent entity and this is an losing entity is an independent. The flourishing entity is independent. Thereby he escapes. Some crores and crores, thousands of crores. Write-offs take place and all that. So there is absolutely no practical policy, banking policy to help the middle class. Only the depositors, the middle class people who retire, they want safe returns, therefore they become first money lenders, bank becomes second money lenders. I think the American collapse, if you have studied correctly, here in our Indian practices, borrower creates a second mortgage. He takes loan from one and second mortgage he will give to another institution and he takes money. There it so happened in America that the bank, who is a mortgagee, it transferred the mortgage for higher amount. Supposing a person has pledged this house, taken about $10,000. Keeping in view the appreciation of the real estate market value and all, that bank transferred, sold it to $12,000 to some other bank. So it is a reverse situation where bank transferring, the market collapsed, the banks collapsed. But in Indian situation, we are saved because of black money. Black money has become a boon because we find that Normally our guidance value is always does not reflect, and sometimes guidance value is appreciated, is increased to help the real estate. The guidance value, supposing it only 2,000, where the market rate may be 10,000. The banks give only 80% of the guidance value. Therefore, they are always safe. The solvency of the property or the value of the property never gets over the market value. That is the reasons banks are, because we transact mostly with black money. You purchase the property for 10,000, for only 2,000 you get registered. This 8,000 is the black money they are created. That way, black money has also helped the Indian economy in one way. Had banks granted on the market value, and if there is a crash in the real estate, I think the same situation would have visited the Indian conditions, the Indian financial institutions. And we have this regular Reserve Bank of India, where it regulates, full control over the activities of the banks. I would say, with all certainty, only two institutions in India are working correctly. One is RBI, other is Indian Railways. With all that enormous network, maybe half an hour, 1 hour delay and all, maybe once in 10 years somewhere some accident, you find they are working. We killed postal institution because of the trade union movement. Now couriers have come, they are as bad as we are virtually killed because of the trade union movement, postals. Another is Reserve Bank of India. It has helped the depositors and the country. This is how it has to be seen. And then another thing, our Indian wage policy is very stupid. In the hierarchy, you have three classes. One is brain, intellectuals. Second is ministerial. Third is hard labor. This is how the hierarchy we have put. For a creative mind, you pay lump sum, you pay whatever that is demanded. It's good, because he has that capacity to contribute. But for a ministerial service, he is placed about the hard labor. A hard labor doesn't get more than 3,000 or 4,000 a month. A ministerial person gets easily 15 to 20,000 per month. What is the work he does? No sweat, no physical exercise, just do it. And if you are in government service, your extra incomes are all assured, and you have some dignity. But hard labor has no dignity. It is for this anomaly you don't get hard labor now. See, hard labor should be put below the brain, the creative mind, and next the ministerial. Your wage policy has to be drastically changed. In an office we find just a man taking the file and putting there, he gets 15,000-20,000 rupees and gets all the facilities, pension, everything, secured life. A fellow who toils in a land, he does not get even 150 rupees. Who would willing to take up that job? Therefore, he will also migrate, come to urban center. It was old saying that urbanites are cheats. See, you find in film songs and other things, you find the rural folk, they used to have that high moral feeling that they are ethically very strong, and urbanites are cheats. Most of the earning in urban area was by cheating. You find your porters and all in KSRTC and railways and all, they just lift the bag and keep it aside and they demand 20 rupees, 50 rupees, 100 rupees. Daily he earns about more than 1,000 rupees. But for a similar work elsewhere in a rural area, he doesn't get even 150 rupees. We have come to a situation where we do not have, although we have got enough men, enough labor, not willing to work on agricultural side. And daily wagers are there, construction workers are there. They constitute, after all, your government servants only 3 to 4% government employment and other things. Rest of it is only private. Organized labor is also very few. Even this trade union movement, they only concentrate upon the organized labor, they neglect this unorganized because they don't get any political profit from tackling these unorganized sectors. Organized, always they will be under their control and they become rival managements. Unions become rival managements. Just to get one increment, they instigate the workforce to rebel against the management and to be obedient with the union. These are the things that have come. So a ringside view, if you look at, you would really find these are the things, very paradoxical situations we find in the condition. Therefore, one solution, this Rozgar Yoga Yojan, about 1,800 rupees 6 months minimum is given. It's a good thing. It's a welcome situation. But the scheme is misused. Scheme is totally misused. On the other hand, it would be better that we should create in every taluk a labor bank. They should get registered. If anybody wants a labor, they should place indent and that labor should be sent. All labor should be insured. They should get PF and other benefits. And you collect money from the man. Some rates be fixed for the labor. And you pay them. And give them all the facilities. And reduce the facilities to these ministerial services. Then they feel the dignity of labor. Unless you bring about some, even maid servants, they are very badly treated. They work only for 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 for 1 hour, 2 hours. The same thing, I think in American situation it's very difficult. You can't have a labor so cheap. You have to pay almost your earnings to do the domestic work there. Therefore, they don't employ anybody. They do all their works, domestic chores, everything they do themselves. Even including carpentry, washing, ironing, car washing. Everything they do on their own. Because they can't engage. If they engage, they have to pay heavily. Almost 50% of the salary they have to pay out. Maybe in a way or this, that's we can't say because they make some survival but not dignified survival. Therefore, state also should create funds, give them all the facilities. See, recently we had an occasion. The RTA Act is come. That's good. Because all the marginalized sections, they can get seats. They can get seats in the good schools at a subsidized rate. We have bringing about some good legislations, but they are not being properly put in place, implemented. You must care about the underprivileged. Our national wage policy does not take into our Payment of Wages Act also. Now that some drastic changes have come, otherwise it was very hopeless. Even in 2000, it was 40 rupees rural wage. Rural worker, 40 rupees was the wage. It's very unfortunate. Therefore, we have to drastically change our national wage policy and national banking policy. These are the serious aberrations what I could notice from the ringside view as a citizen, and I am highly thankful to the organizers for sharing my wee bit of mind with these venered senior citizens of the Bangalore. I thank the Gokhale Institute for giving this platform to express my views. I thank one and all.
Friends, those who want to ask questions, please come to the dais, tell your name and put your questions as briefly as you can.
Sir, good evening, sir. Your speech was very good and you have covered most of the areas, especially the labor bank concept. I like it. But I have got some things, especially regarding senior citizens. You are very harsh. See, for example, you compare senior citizens of America with India. America, there is a social security for the senior citizens. Here, we don't have any social security. If a senior citizen doesn't get from the banks, where he will get? How he will? That's one. So unless government provides some social security, there is no this one. Bank rates, for example, bank rates, correct, it should be less. But problem here is that America, what I hear is, American economy has fallen because of the debit trap. They had so many credit cards, so many things were invested, those things. And another question regarding political ills is, for example, dynasty. I agree, you don't allow that man to contest again. But his wife will contest, his son will contest. He is more wiser man. They should not allow the dynasty to contest. This one. This one was very, heart-touching. I am thankful to you, sir. Thank you.
Sir, with regard to the dynastic, I said, if the family member is to contest, break, not immediate succession. So some other force would have come.
Yeah.
And whatever this impact he had made, that gets diluted, and that will not be to the benefit of his kin or a relative when he contests the next election. Not in the immediate successive election. One term break, then you can contest. Then this question of manipulation would not come. With regard to this social security, sir, normally if you look at all the pensioners have their children with good income.
Not all, sir, not all. In America, if a senior citizen goes and sits, he will be paid.
Indian condition. Therefore, I apologetically started my saying that my views on this would be to your distaste.
And your society has to come up, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Because your children have to take care. Because we have to create a situation where children should not abdicate their responsibility of maintaining the parents. What is your opinion to restore the black money? Illond question is there. I think I don't have proper information to answer this question. To restore the black money from the Swiss banks. Of course, that's a lot of black money is there. And we find that even the underworld money is invested in the business, in film business, real estate, it is all said. Therefore, I said we have to have adequate legislation to tackle them. But as far as black money is concerned in Swiss banks, we don't have any idea. And of course, the directions have also been issued, steps are there. There may be some truth in what these allegations may be. But I am not, without a first-hand knowledge of the things, I don't risk to answer this question.
Yes, very good evening, sir. Very good evening, gentlemen. Actually, a lot of information grabbed from you, actually. I think I'm the youngest sitting in front of all the senior citizens. Fine, sir. My question is about regarding, you spoke about we should be having National Crime Investigation, which is a constitutional body. What is CBI doing now as a national crime investigation people? Why they are stuck in the hands of central people? And the second thing is the political people who are coming from, as you rightly said, people come from different languages, maybe, or religion, maybe. What should be a qualifying benchmark to become a politician? Can we do anything for that? Any benchmark to come to a social service?
I don't subscribe to have qualifications for politicians, because educated are more corrupt and more dangerous.
No, but any benchmark should be there for that.
The illiterate people, our Indian democracy has survived because of illiterate masses. We have so many elections. We had so many elections. There is peaceful change of governments. It is only illiterates who in large number participated and brought about this silent revolution of change of governments. Mahatma Gandhi was faulted and doubted when he canvassed for universal franchise, and ultimately Mahatma Gandhi proved right by our Indian experience. And with regard to other question you said?
Regarding that National Crime Investigation.
CBI is only an executive body under the control of the ruling governments. It is not a constitutional body. You should elevate, and all these investigation agencies should be brought under the net of the constitutional body. Then only they can effectively function.
Thank you very much, sir.
My question is about we have accepted a democratic setup as our ruling. So when we have accepted this type of government to rule over us, we have to accept its evils also. Elections and the elected representatives are necessary evil for our setup. If a doctor's father desires his son to become another doctor, why not a politician's son have another go at the politics if he is capable of doing it? The question comes when, if he is successively elected, he may not be up to the mark. But the point is, we are electing him. If he is being elected a second time, third time, fourth time, we have every power to dislodge him. So, we cannot straight away say it is a dynastic type of politics. We can remove, the whole setup can be changed. Only thing is, we as responsible citizens are responsible for this present state of affairs. I would like you to clarify why you insisted on dynastic politics.
Sir, it is easy said than done. Others, good people, have no chance to contest the election. It is all criminalized. You will be killed. You will be killed or purchased. And it's very difficult. If you earn only a pocket full of salary, you are spared. If you become overnight rich, you think of one will come and demand a tax. They demand a tax. The life is very, very difficult. And the practices that are employed in getting elected are very unholy. Nothing wrong, a father and son are becoming, but the methods they employ to perpetuate in power, that has become very dangerous. Can you think of, you see, nowadays, to contest an election, they easily say about 10 crores, 15 crores for a assembly election. Can it be ever be imagined? This is what happening. Because theoretically you can dislodge him, vote him, that's there. But practically is it possible? Even for a corporate elections, corporators spend, they say, about 5 crores, 10 crores.
Excuse me, I have a question. When the Indian Constitution was drafted, it is because British rule was there. And at that time it was drafted and everything was taken from England point of view and England people's mentality way. So in India there was originality was there. There is a instant native laws and natives philosophical ideas. Nothing has been taken to the Indian Constitution. It's purely it's not suited to Indian way of people living. So I think that is the major drawback has been taken, and nothing has been taken into account for Indian situation, Indian peoples. Kindly comment on this.
I don't subscribe. The Indian Constitution is the best political document. All good things have been taken there. See, even a bad thing in a good man, bad things in the hands of a good man, he can bring about some good results. Good things in the management of a bad fellow always goes bad. So, the Indian Constitution we can't, because the British pressure was not acted upon the people, members of the, they were not even elected. They were chosen. They were invited. From different areas they were invited, Constituent Assembly. All men of great eminence, those who made all sacrifices in life. Except the values of life, they never bothered anything about these material comforts or anything. Such people, those minds, they sat and drafted this constitution, taking the best from the different parts. And parliamentary system was also adopted because they thought that the American system of presidential system may lead to dictatorship. Because India is fragmented. It has got different cultures, different languages, different castes, everything. So to accommodate the different sections to express their opinion or to have their political representation, parliamentary system was accepted. So I don't think that Indian constitution is deficient in any way. But certain of the things which requires for the later developments, constitution may require some amendments. But the spirit of the constitution, and especially the Supreme Court, after interpreting in Keshwanand Bharati case the basic structure, it has really saved the Indian democracy. Otherwise, even the constitution would have been destroyed.
ಸಾರಿ ಸರ್ ಕನ್ನಡ ಬರುತ್ತಲ್ಲ ಒನ್ ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ ಸರ್ ನಾ ಈಗ ಒಂದು ಏನಂದರೆ ಸೊ ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಒಂದು ಸಲ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅಫ್ಕೋರ್ಸ್ ಒಂದು ಸಲ ಈ ಸೆಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಹಿಂಗೆ ಮಾಡಿದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಸೊ ಅಫ್ಕೋರ್ಸ್ ಆ ಜನ್ರೇಷನ್ಗೆ ಆ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಸೊ ಅಫ್ಕೋರ್ಸ್ ಆಮೇಲೆ ಅದಾದಮೇಲೆ ಬೇರೆ ಜನ್ರೇಷನ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಸಿ ದೇ ಆರ್ ನಾಟ್ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಅಷ್ಟು ಕಂಫರ್ಟೇಬಲ್ ಅಷ್ಟು ಆಗಲ್ಲ ಅಟ್ಲೀಸ್ಟ್ ಒಂದು ನಾ ಹೇಳೋದಂದ್ರೆ ಎವ್ರಿ ಟೈಮ್ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಮಾಡೋದಲ್ಲ ಅಟ್ಲೀಸ್ಟ್ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಷನಲ್ ಚೇಂಜಸ್ ಯಾವಾಗ ಎಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲಿ ಬೇಕಾಗಿರುತ್ತೋ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ರೀಸನಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋಷ್ಟು ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ಭಾಳ ಆ ಚೇಂಜಸ್ ಹೇಗೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾಯಿಲ್ಲ
ಆ ಥರ ನೀವು ಬಯಸುವಾಗ ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಚೇಂಜಸ್ ಅವಶ್ಯಕತೆ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಚೇಂಜಸ್ ಬರಬೇಕಾಗಿದ್ದೆಲ್ಲ ನಮ್ಮ ಸುಪ್ರೀಂ ಕೋರ್ಟ್ ಜಡ್ಜ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಪ್ರಕಾರ ಬಂದು ಒಂದು ಹತೋಟಿ ಹಾಕಿ ನಿರಂಕುಶತ್ವಕ್ಕನ್ನು ಹತೋಟಿ ಹಾಕಿ ಒಂದು ಸರಿಯಾದ ಪದ್ಧತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಡೆಯುವಂಥ ಒಂದು ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಥಾಪನೆ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಈ ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಂದು ಏನಪ್ಪ ಅಂದರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಷನಲ್ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂಸ್ ಏನಂದರೆ ದೇ ಆರ್ ಆಲ್ ಎಟರ್ನಲ್ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂಸ್. ನೀವು ಯಾವೊಂದು ಧರ್ಮದಲ್ಲಿ ತೊಗೊಂಡ್ರೂ ಏನು ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಅಮೂಲ್ಯವಾದ ಸಿದ್ಧಾಂತಗಳವೋ ಅವೆಲ್ಲವೂ ನಮ್ಮ ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಷನಲ್ಲಿ ಅಳವಡಿಸಿವೆ. ಈ ಫಂಡಮೆಂಟಲ್ ರೈಟ್ಸು, ಫಂಡಮೆಂಟಲ್ ಡ್ಯೂಟೀಸ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ, ಆಮೇಲೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಸುಪ್ರೀಂ ಕೋರ್ಟ್ ಇಂಡಿಪೆಂಡೆಂಟ್ ಸುಪ್ರೀಂ ಕೋರ್ಟ್ ಅಂತ, ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಿರಬೇಕು, ಏನು ಥರ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು, ಆಮೇಲೆ ಟ್ರೇಡ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಕಾಮರ್ಸ್, ದಿಸ್ ಆರ್ ಆಲ್ ದಿ ಯೂನಿಟರಿ ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಚರ್ಸ್. ನೀವು ಟ್ರೇಡ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಕಾಮರ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಯಾರೂ ಬ್ಯಾರಿಯರ್ಸ್ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಒಂದು ಸ್ಟೇಟಿಂದ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕು ಗೀಸ ಅಂಬೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಎಲ್ಲಾದ್ರೂ ಹೋಗಿ ಎಲ್ಲಾದ್ರೂ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. ಅದೇ ನಾ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು ನಿಮಗೆ, ಈ ಕಾನೂನು ನಮ್ಗೆ ರೀಜನ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಲ್ಯಾಂಗ್ವೇಜ್ ಬಂದುಬಿಟ್ಟು ಪಾಪ ಬೇರೆಯವ್ರನ್ನ ಬಂದವ್ರನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಹಿಂಸೆ ಮಾಡೋ ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿ ಬಂದುಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೆ ನಮ್ಮದು. ಇವು ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶ, ಒಂದು ಅಖಂಡ ಭಾರತ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಜೆ ಎಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಎಲ್ಲಾದ್ರೂ ಹೋಗಿ ಏನಾದರೂ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು ಅನ್ನೋ ಸಂವಿಧಾನ ಹಕ್ಕುಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ನಾವು ಕಲ್ಪಿಸಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಅದು ಯಾವ ಯುವಕರಿಗೆ ಬೆಳವಣಿಗೆಗೆ ಯಾವ ಚ್ಯುತಿ ಆಗದಂಥದ್ದು, ಇನ್ನು ಯುವಕರ ಬೆಳವಣಿಗೆ ಅನುಕೂಲವಾಗುವಂಥ ಅಮೆಂಡ್ಮೆಂಟ್ಸು ತಂದಿದ್ದೀವಿ ನಾವು. ರೈಟ್ ಟು ಎಜುಕೇಷನ್ ಅಂತ ತಂದಿದ್ದೀವಿ, ಆಮೇಲೆ ಫಂಡಮೆಂಟಲ್ ಡ್ಯೂಟೀಸ್ ಅಂತ ತಂದಿದ್ದೀವಿ, ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ತಂದಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಹಾಗೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಷನಲ್ಲಿ ಏನೂ ದೋಷ ಇಲ್ಲ. ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಏನು ಅಮಲು ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀವೋ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ದೋಷಗಳೇ ಆಗಲಿ. ನಾವು ಕಾನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಷನ್ ದೂಷಿಸೋದ್ರೊಳಗೆ ಏನೂ ಅರ್ಥವಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ನನ್ನ ಭಾವನೆ.
Hello sir, first of all thanks a lot for all your insights on many aspects that you have touched upon. I had two clarifications with respect to two things that I had. Indian value system, I'm not talking about the constitutions. When I say value system, as simple as a family system. You said children has to take care of their parents, which I totally agree. But I have seen many of my uncles. My father had 6 brothers, mother had 4 sisters and all. One day they were not good children when their parents were seniors or elders actually. I don't think they didn't stand by, as an example for their children. I think when we speak about Indian value system and family system, we all generally forget to stand by example as a self-example. And if I take care of my parents today, my children will learn it from me, and tomorrow they will take care of me, is something that I feel missing in my family also. Second thing, social security. One of the uncles just spoke about there is no social security for senior citizens. I disagree, because there is no social security for somebody like me also. Recently we built a small house. My neighbor, behind neighbor, actually was an advocate. I don't know what she advocates generally, but by profession she is an advocate, and she claimed she didn't have a setback and she demanded me to give setback. And I said, why? Actually that's not correct, because when you don't have a setback there's no rule actually, or at least if you can break the rule, why not me? And she clearly told, I am an advocate. For every brick that you put, I can give a treble. Initially I thought, before I get through this problem, I thought, I'm an MBA in finance, why can't I fight? I'm equally qualified. But that's not true. Qualification is only in books and in office. Outside the world is quite different actually. And she proved that she can give me a problem everywhere. So having rules in book is not sufficient. Probably one thing that I would request you to tell somebody like me is how do we tackle this basically? If I have to go to a police station for a simple passport or a visa, I have to pay money. There is no other way. Recently, I got a license for my four-wheeler. 4 times I failed because I tried my best to get it in an ethical way. And 5th time, I did pay money and I got the license. Yeah? So, probably if you can help me understand, family, once the family is good, if parents have values, children will have values. If the system has values, everybody in the system will respect the values. But we are missing both the things. Please help us with this.
So the problem of disintegration of family, you should go to the root of the problem. The family system was very strong when the economy was feudal based, agriculture based on agriculture. This industrial revolution, computer and all these things have virtually contributed for disintegration of the families. The joint family system, because I also lived in a joint family with 30 members. The values we practice something different. Your parent never love you. Your uncles will take care of you. And this is a cross flow of love. You don't directly love your children. You love the children of your brothers and they love you. The children of the, like that things happen. And you develop that sense of tolerance, sense of sacrifice, this obdurate, adamant and other things. You never be a pampered child. Most of the generation are spoiled because they are all pampered child. There are only 1 or 2 in the family. They expect whatever demanded that they get. They are never trained, their mind is never trained that even when they don't get, they should have a composure. That feudal system gone, your employment is urban employment, then migration. Everybody thought that agriculture is something, an unpleasant vocation to be done. And then you have this, it also started that everybody giving a daughter wanted the son-in-law to be separate from the parents. See, the mother-in-law domination was overdone. And virtually it transgressed the decent limits and bordering the criminality. That situation we developed. That is the reason everybody thought that no, they should live separately. This is how the disintegration of family set in. Now these two, between husband and wife living together, it also becomes a very difficult after 10 years. Because when I joined as a lawyer, this divorce petition was never there. Even for a year or 1 year or 2 years, there used to be one petition only for restitution of conjugal rights. Question of divorce was never thought of. Now you have about 6,000 to 7,000 divorce cases in Bangalore. That's on record. Without coming to court, there are so many. As you say, it is very true. The parents, home is the first school for the child. If you train them, inculcate them the value, then naturally you will change. If you practice, your child also perceives and then it will practice. So it all depends upon how morals are built up in the family. And that would ultimately result in building up a moralistic society. Society is a group of families. Group of families is a society. Therefore, as you said, it's very true. Nowadays, even the parents, they are sent to these old age homes. The children, those were the days I hear from the people that they refused good opportunities, saying that no, my father is old, my parents are old, nobody is to look after. They used to stay back. And with minimum comforts or minimum earnings, they used to remain satisfied and they helped the parents, taking care. Now it is not so. They go out in America, only night they phone, make a call, have you taken medicine, how are you and all that. That's all. Or they are put in these rented homes. Pay rent. That is what we are building up, that society. Geriatric problem was not a problem at all up to 1960s, 70s. Elders were treated with respect. An elderly man was treated with respect because at that age they don't want anything except respect. They don't require anything because they don't have, the eating also comes down. moving comes down, they remain quietly seated at one place. Therefore, any elder, if you look, they feel hurt if they are not respected. What they require is only a respect. When they lose the respect and ill-treated, they don't feel like staying. These are the values and cultures we have to develop and we have to tell the children. But now the society is different. How to get rich quick, how to earn more. You work for 6 months in one company, go to another company, get higher salary. No rolling stone gathers no moss. That's how things are happening. No stable marriages and no stable employment. That is the scenario now. Thank you.
One question. What is your comments and opinion of egregious judicial blunders and mistakes?
ಕೇಳಿಸಿದೆ. For your brutally frank question, my soft answer. Yes, very true. We all live in the quality of times. Judiciary is not an exception. If there are aberrations in judiciary, as you find in other institutions, it's common to be found in judiciary also. Judiciary need not be singled out. If you get a fever, your legs will ache, your head will ache, everybody body aches. Isn't it? In a similar way, when system gets fever, even judiciary, a part of the system, also gets aching.
Friends, we come to the last part of the program. Vote of thanks by Sri S.R. Ramaswamy, Honorary Secretary, JIPA.
ನಮ್ಮ ಮುಂದಿನ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ನಾಳೆ ಬುಧವಾರ ಸಂಜೆ ಶ್ರೀ ಕೆ ಸಿ ರಘು ಆಹಾರ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನ ತಜ್ಞರು ಅವರಿಂದ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಆಹಾರ ಪದ್ಧತಿ ಹಿಂದೆ, ಇಂದು, ಮುಂದೆ. ತುಂಬ ಸ್ವಾರಸ್ಯಕರವಾದ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಸಂಖ್ಯೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಬರಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ವಿನಂತಿ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. Justice Sridhar Rao has given a most enlightening presentation which has made all of us think. He has expressed deep felt concern about the all-round decline in public life. Political corruption and criminalization have gone on hand in hand. The present system is not only dysfunctional but also keeps out genuine talent, as he explained. There have been no serious efforts to control corruption at higher echelons and political hierarchy. There should be constitutional bodies to address corruption, which he emphasized. Even more worrisome are tendencies towards disintegration of the country, whether because of language or riparian rights. It's a shame that there are no restraints on criminals contesting elections. In such an environment, naturally, family institutions have crumbled, not to speak about the quality of education and so on. Are we heading towards becoming a banana republic? That is the million-dollar question. Justice Sridhar Rao explained how in economy too, small entrepreneurship is being throttled. Lending policy needs to be rationalized. There are serious anomalies in economy. An attender is overpaid while a hard-working farmer is left high and dry. Wage policy and banking policy need to be made more people-friendly. It is devoutly to be wished that the sage counsel of non-partisan thinkers like Justice Sridhar Rao will promote rethinking in quarters where it matters. On behalf of Indian Liberal Group, Bangalore chapter and the Gokhale Institute of Public Affairs, I extend a most warm vote of thanks to Justice Sridhar Rao. I request Justice Puttaswamy to honor the distinguished speakers.
What is it?